Hey, welcome to the Vortex Garage, and today we're troubleshooting our Mustang. We went ahead and got our new MSD box, and we've been trying to figure out why we don't have ignition on this. And well, I think we might have figured it out, so let's switch to the other camera and we'll show you what we found. So I've been trying to get this thing started, and we've got our new digital 6AL hooked up. I went ahead and set the rev limiter to a basic setting on it. The wiring is exactly the same as the old box, so we're not using the white wire because we don't have a points ignition. We're using the purple and green, I think it is, for a mag pickup, and the plug is even still the same. So I just plug that straight into the existing wire. It goes all the way around to our magnetic pickup distributor. Down here I've got our wiring. This is our fuse and relay block, and our ignition box sat under it. I did have to remove the horns and the mount that I had for this. Kind of realized that although I liked how my setup looked here and it was functional, it's not exactly the easiest to repair. For one thing, I ran nuts and bolts through the fender, and then I put the fender liner back in. So you can't really access those. So I've just sort of popped them out for now, and we're probably going to put nutserts in there when we put things back together. But the primary thing was, how do we figure out why it's not running? So I plugged the new box in, and box didn't light up. Got nothing. So I'm back to square one. So I took a look at our coil and thought, well, maybe the coil's bad. I didn't test that. I just assumed before there was power to the box and no light. So, but hey, I said, well, maybe I should expand my troubleshooting. So I took a look at the coil and swapped out a coil from one of the new ones I bought for the Fury. I know it's not quite the same, but for some reason this was dead totally, then maybe I'd get at least a little something, but nope, no dice. I was about to kind of test it manually. You can actually take your magnetic pickup and put a jumper wire in and basically cause it to spark, so you can take your coil wire off the distributor and test it that way. I hadn't done that before, but I figured no light on the box. Now, prior, I had checked all the connections. I had 12-volt ignition. I had 12-volt source power. However, I was testing my grounds by grounding a jumper wire straight to my grounding block in the back. And I took a look at my wiring diagram that I left myself, because I was nice enough to draw one up so I could troubleshoot stuff later on. And the ignition box ground, which is down in that mess, goes in the loom straight up to one of those connections on our ground block. And it's wrapped in loom the entire way. So what I did to test our box is I just basically cut the wires from the existing harness, and then the new wiring harness from MSD, I just cut the ends, and I just twisted them together and put some tape over them. Now when the box wasn't working, I started probing our stuff again. But this time I had a jumper wire hooked up to our ground. And what I found was that if I jumped the ground to the battery or to there, I had 12-volt main power. If I put it on my ground, which should be good because it's literally a single wire that goes and just connects to our ground block and it's still connected, I got nothing. So that was the issue the whole time around, was there's a bad ground somewhere in that wiring. So what I've done, I've got a jumper wire here, and I've just gone into one of the areas that I had drilled out, and there's some bare metal. So it's not the best ground in the world, but just a little jumper wire to test the ground. Now, watch this. Let's go ahead and turn our battery on. We've got our ignition key in the on position. So we're just going to reconnect this. And let's watch our box. Let's see if the light lights up. It did. So it had the indicator for status, which is good. And then the 5 blinks, I believe, are for the tach reference. So I think we're in good shape. So I say we give this thing a test fire and see if it starts up. Got to squeeze back here. All right, that's good. All right, so now that we've squeezed by here, we can talk a little bit. And I'm definitely super excited that we have our new ignition box here working. We've got our ignition mystery solved. The car runs. So I'm definitely happy about that. But at the same time, I'm a little bit bummed out, a little bit disappointed. And the reason is I feel like I probably missed a 101 level kind of electrical thing when I was troubleshooting this before. The fact that I was most likely, from what I recall, jumpering the ground to our ground block because I couldn't assume that was bad because it's one wire that goes there and it's all soldered. I missed an obvious thing when I was testing for power. So I checked for power on the old box. I had 12 volt on both the hot and the switched ignition, which led me to believe the box was burned out. But if I was jumpering the ground and not testing the actual ground wire it was using, then I was totally missing a very important part of that equation. And what that means is that other Streetfire box probably works perfectly. In fact, I'm 99% sure it does, because we hooked this one up with the same wires and it exhibited the same problem. It wasn't until we jumped the ground we got it working. So a little bit bummed out. It's a silly mistake because now I got this box. I've already cut the harness. I probably can't return it, but I could always sell it in my local hot rod group. There's always somebody looking for one of these. Plus, I have so many things around here, I could always reuse this for another project later on. I could also go ahead and put it in this car, and when it's future-proofed, when we redo the motor one day, we're going to have a kick-ass ignition. Now, in the meantime, that is the question, and that's what I'll have to figure out when I put this back together. Do I see if the Streetfire box works, put it back in, have it all mounted out exactly the way it was, and enjoy life? Or do I go ahead and say, well, hey, let's put this 6AL in, let's rewire it, make sure everything's good, maybe even mount the box inside to keep it out of the weather, and do that. So I've got some thinking and deciding to do in that. But definitely happy that we solved the problem here. We know what the issue is. But again, it's a good reminder when you're troubleshooting, don't miss the simple stuff. Sometimes it's just the ground, as apparently it was in this case. But hey, as we do more, we'll go ahead and keep you updated on things we're doing. That's about all I have for this weekend. We didn't do too much out here. We did a lot of other things. We'll maybe add another video here shortly. Otherwise, we'll see you soon on Vortex Garage. And don't forget to check your grounds. This is our MSD Streetfire ignition, or Streetfire by MSD, whatever you want to call it. Since I thought this box was dead, I went ahead and cracked it open to see if I could spot any obvious damage. And suffice to say, I could not, but I can show you what it looks like. So there's obviously a heat transfer pad that those transistors would go against the cast aluminum as a heatsink. On the bottom there's another heat transfer pad, it looks like, and there's various electronics. Looks like the entire board is coated a little bit, but not entirely waterproofed. But I did not spot any obvious damage. I didn't do any in-depth testing, but nothing looked burnt out or blown out.